Hi, Brianna.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Long time no see.
Yeah, right? Long time.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Tanya. Hi, Meg.
You.
Good to see you both.
All right, so I have, hey, how you doing, Tyler? Great to see you. I've got, do I have a quorum? Tanya, Debbie, Tyler, Pat, Mike. And I know we've got more coming, but we've got a quorum to be able to, sorry, I've got a pencil in my hair. We have a quorum to be able to vote on the minutes. So at 7:31, let's call the Alternative Energy Committee meeting to order. I want to thank Rihanna again for arranging this and being so much support to us as a committee. We get things done here, and we are so excited to hear from our speaker. But first, we've got some administrative work, which is going back to our July meeting minutes and approving those. And the reason is because the last week or the last meeting when those were approved, there was not a quorum. So just to be official, we're going to vote to do that with a quorum. And then we will vote on last month's meeting minutes, and then we can get those posted. So, excuse my dogs. Did everybody get a chance to review the meeting minutes? We'll start with Brianna. What is the July one?
The what?
July 12th, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, let's start with the July 12th meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to accept the July 12th?
I have it as July 8th. That's what I'd show as.
July 8th.
Yes.
Sorry.
And August 12th. My bad.
Sorry. Okay, so July 8th. Do I have, this is a revote again. Do I have a motion to accept the July 8th, 2021 meeting minutes as presented or with minor edits? Hi, Steve. We're on the July 8th meeting minutes right now. I'll entertain a motion to approve the July 8th, 2021 meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the July 8th, 2021 meeting minutes. Mike Schmidt.
Great. Thank you, Mike Schmidt. And because we are, I'll need a second, and then because we are virtual, we'll have to do a roll call vote. Do I have a second? I'll do. Sorry, Tyler. Thank you. Tyler will second. So we're going to now go around and do the vote. Tanya Bodell, aye. Tyler?
Tyler Tebow, aye.
Mike
Steve?
Schmidt, aye.
Matt Gooding, I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay.
I have to abstain. This is Steve Winter. I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay. Debbie? Can you take yourself off mute?
Aye.
Debbie Cook, aye. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Let's move to our August 12th meeting minutes. You could take a moment to review. And I want to commend Debbie again for her amazing meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Pat. Do I have a second?
Mike Schmidt, second.
Thank you, Mike. All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Tanya Bodell, aye.
Debbie Cook, aye.
Pat Gooding, aye. I'm not sure if I came through.
Mike Schmidt, aye.
All right, fabulous. So those meeting minutes are approved. I think Steve and Tyler were absent. So that's our core. So actually, Steve and Tyler, do you abstain?
Yes, I was not present. I was
Okay.
present for the previous meeting, but not for the August meeting.
Okay. And Tyler will abstain. So we have 4 yeses and 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. All right. It is my pleasure to have Megan Akai present to us from MAPC. And Megan, you can give a little bit of background on MAPC, but basically their role is to help municipalities go through planning processes and think about how to move forward on key things, including sustainability, achieving net zero goals, and they provide technical support to towns that are looking to do grants to the federal government for funding. So we are very happy to have Megan here, and she is going to tell us about some of the lessons they've learned from helping other municipalities go forward with sustainability goals.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me. And I have a presentation I can run through. I think, Brianna, if you want to make me a co-host, I could share my screen.
Yes, you should have sharing ability now.
Okay, cool. I will do that. Oh, did that? There we go. Awesome. All right. Well, great to be here tonight with all of you, and thanks so much for putting me on the agenda tonight. So I have a bit of a primer just in terms of net zero planning with MAPC, and we'll run through some of the resources that we have, and then I think we'll have time at the end for question and answer. I think in terms of specifically ways that MAPC can work with Cohasset and things that we can support you on as you're starting out on your climate action planning journey. So as Tanya mentioned, MAPC is the regional planning agency. We serve 101 cities and towns, so this is our region, including Cohasset down on the South Shore. We divide our region up into sub-regions, so this lists all the different ways that we're working with our communities at that more regional level. And we work with communities on a wide array of different planning topics, from housing to public health, land use, economic development, government affairs. So lots of different departments working on different things with communities. Our clean energy department has been around for about over 10 years now, working with municipalities on primarily regional energy projects and helping communities with procurement, climate and clean energy planning work that I'll talk about more today, and providing that technical assistance, whether it's on a specific energy or climate related project, or as Tanya mentioned, helping communities tap into those grant programs to be able to fund this work locally. And then in terms of the net zero or climate action work that we do with communities, this is something that we have been building over the years, but really launched in 2017 and have since had an opportunity to work directly with municipalities in our region to develop net zero and climate action plans. So we work with our communities on data collection and helping analyze that information in terms of greenhouse gas emissions at the local level. We work with communities on the planning side, so figuring out how to develop those plans, community engagement, and identification of those strategies to work towards the goals that communities are setting. And then on the goal setting side, helping communities as well with development of ordinances or other language to set those local goals and navigate that adoption process as well. So just to start out on kind of the basics, what we've been working on over the years to develop is what we call kind of our framework for net zero action. And throughout this, I'll be kind of talking through a lot of the content that's a part of our net zero playbook, and I'll talk a little bit more specifically about what that is, but a lot of this content is available on our website as well that you can dive into in more depth. So over the years of working with communities, we've sort of developed this framework of these different phases that we see as critical to action. And the approach that we take to the work with communities is that we don't see this necessarily as a linear process. You can kind of start at whichever phase your community is at and where it makes the most sense, whether that's starting with recruiting that support or setting a goal or doing the actual planning work or gathering the information to inform that planning process. And my slides today will kind of focus in on giving some background information in terms of pursuing that commitment, doing the holistic planning process, and gathering that baseline information to inform climate action planning at the local level. I should have said at the beginning of my presentation, if you do have questions, I know we'll have time at the end, but feel free to jump in and I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions throughout too. So to talk a little bit more about commitment and what that means in terms of net zero planning, the way that we've been approaching this work with communities is taking the approach to it in terms of net zero. So the way that we have defined that in our work with municipalities is that in order to achieve net zero, the community or whatever geographic entity you're working at must reduce greenhouse gas emissions to the greatest extent possible through various amount of strategies and actions, and then balance out any remaining emissions through GHG removal or offsets. And you'll hear a lot of other kind of terms in this space like carbon neutral or 100% renewable. Carbon neutral is essentially the same thing as net zero, just another way of explaining it. And achieving 100% renewable commitment locally is a key part of getting to net zero. We want to have that 100% clean energy in order to be able to reduce emissions as much as possible. One way that I think can be helpful to kind of visualize what we're talking about with net zero is that we're kind of starting out with this imbalanced scale where we have a lot of emissions on one side in terms of the fuel that our homes and our businesses are consuming, those fossil fuels that we're burning, and the fuels that our vehicles are running on right now. And on the other side, a smaller amount of clean energy and carbon sequestration that's happening through our natural environment. And the goal with net zero is to basically take this scale for your community and get it balanced out. So reduce those emissions as much as possible, and then make up for it on the other side of things, acknowledging that there are some processes that may be very hard to completely eliminate those emissions from. And net zero is also the framework that is being taken at the state level and also internationally in terms of the International Panel on Climate Change and where we know we need to get based on what we're seeing across the globe. And this just highlights some of the key kind of commitments that the state has made more recently in 2020, and even more recently in the past year, the commitments that the legislature has made in terms of those interim climate goals. And this data, it's a little bit dated at this point from the last time we sort of did a quick scan of where communities in just the MAPC region were at. But back in 2019, we had already seen a lot of progress in terms of nearly 2/3, so 66 out of 101 of the cities and towns in our region having these strong committee structures dedicated to climate sustainability and energy. 21 of those communities having in place or developing climate action plans. That number has definitely grown just in the past 2 years in terms of the communities that we're working with directly. And I know there are others that are likely moving forward that we're not working with. And then again, a large number of communities that have made these commitments at the local level. Within our region, we also have a Metro Mayors Coalition that's focused on climate mitigation that has the communities listed on this slide participating, and they've also made a net zero carbon neutral commitment, and they're working towards that goal by 2050 as a region. So setting that goal is one thing, but another first step that we encourage communities to take to kind of assess where you're at is to start to gather some of that information to inform what emissions look like in your community and also guide where you might want to target the most of your energy in terms of some of the initial actions that you might take to reduce emissions locally. And so a key way to do that you might all be familiar with is the greenhouse gas inventory. And this just provides kind of a shared definition for what that means when we talk about a greenhouse gas inventory. So when we're talking about an inventory, this is really accounting for all the emissions that are resulting within a specific geographic boundary. So you can do that at the city or town level, at the state, or even national level. And primarily, you're looking at carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide as the primary gases you're accounting for to better understand your local emissions profile. And one of the things that we've been working on is guidance, in addition to all of the plethora of tools and frameworks that are out there at the national and international level, is resources to support communities to more easily do this and get that initial baseline assessment of your emissions locally through some resources that we launched last year. So we have some resources out there. We have a step-by-step guide that really will give you kind of a basic intro and crash course on all you need to know about greenhouse gas emissions and how to inventory those, specifically if you're a Massachusetts community. And it will take you step by step through the different publicly available data sets that you can collect to begin to inventory your emissions locally. And it's a companion guide to our spreadsheet-based tool that enables you to basically put all of the data in on one tab and then get your inventory in the next tab. So it really automates the process of being able to get a baseline of your primary sources of greenhouse gas emissions. There are limitations based on the data that's out there in terms of what you're able to account for, but in terms of looking at your residential and commercial buildings and your passenger and commercial vehicles, this tool will help you get that sort of overall assessment of the primary emitters within your community. This just kind of shows you some of the resources that are available in that guide. So there's an initial kind of checklist to walk you through sort of key characteristics about your community and how that might inform what data you actually need to collect, a worksheet to help communities with the actual data collection process, and also the methodology documentation, so that once you do use our tool, you can document all of the nitty gritty in terms of the methods pretty easily using that template. So moving more into kind of how we're approaching climate action and net zero planning with communities, our framework for action really prioritizes a holistic approach to planning. So when I'm referring to holistic planning, it means that when we're talking about a emissions mitigation measure, we're not just considering the energy and the emissions benefits of the action, we're also thinking about what could the local economic benefits, public health outcomes, and also equity considerations be as we're thinking through the different measures that communities may want to implement locally to reach their climate goals. The other resource, in addition to our framework for action that we produced as a part of our playbook, is a framework for equity that helps to frame some of these issues in terms of how to center equity within your climate action planning process. And that resource basically will take you through kind of each of the stage of the planning process, from budgeting and scoping to initial research and surveying, stakeholder engagement, actual action selection and development of the plan, and communicating that, and what questions to ask and how to really refine your approach to make sure that you're creating a plan that centers around issues of equity that are specific to your community. And then in terms of the way that we're approaching the plan development process with communities, and some of the things that we've learned from all of the resources that are out there, is that there's a pretty wide array of what you could tackle when it comes to a climate action or a net zero plan. On one end of the spectrum, you have things like the Carbon Free Boston report and efforts undertaken by New York City to really hyper-specific quantitative goals and assess impacts and undertake really large-scale planning and engagement processes to do those modeling efforts to get really specific about what those impacts might be. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are a lot of sort of general roadmaps and guidance documents out there at a more national level around, here are some of the best practices that cities may want to consider and undertake as they're thinking about climate action. And then more towards kind of the mid-range, we have some plans like the net zero plan from the city of Cambridge, Somerville's climate forward plan, that are very detailed implementation plans and set those kind of interim milestones for how those cities are moving towards their climate goals. And what we kind of set out to support more of our communities across the region with is sort of in between of those plans and these general guidance documents. So we wanted to make developing a robust climate action plan or a net zero plan more accessible to smaller communities that may not necessarily have as much resources to dedicate toward comprehensive quantitative analysis or implementation plan, but still want to be able to kind of blueprint out what that roadmap looks like for them, specifically in Massachusetts, to be able to tackle their emissions. So that's really what we've been focusing on to help communities build capacity to be able to do. And one of the key parts of the resources that we've been developing is our Net Zero Playbook. So I've already mentioned the Framework for Action and Framework for Equity, which are really, as they say in their names, they're frameworks and ways to start approaching the planning process, and a good place to start if you're just thinking through kind of what will make sense for my community and how can I approach this in an equitable and socially conscious way. And then in addition to that, we're developing sort of sector-specific chapters that have culled through a lot of national and local climate action plans and other best practices that we've learned from our work with communities over the years in terms of sort of top recommended actions within that sector to tackle greenhouse gas emissions within your community, and some places to get started in terms of next steps, who might be involved with implementing those actions, and other resources to get you started. So right now, we've released our net zero buildings and zero emission mobility chapters that are available on our website to dig into more. And we will be this fall finally releasing our clean energy supply and climate smart permitting and zoning chapters. Anticipate those launching in November. And the goal with developing this playbook is that we wanted it to be something where a smaller community could come into these resources, get their bearings with what's involved with a net zero planning process, and then kind of plug and play and pick and choose from different chapters to start to build that blueprint and roadmap for your own local net zero plan. Even with just 2 chapters out, I've been excited to see a sustainability committee in Ashland already using those to really be the basis for developing strategies and using that to guide the work that they're doing on net zero. So to wrap up, I just wanted to share kind of one of the more recent examples from a plan that we helped develop. So I guess starting in 2019, pre-pandemic, we got a grant through the state to support Natick, as well as Arlington and Melrose with developing all these resources that I've been talking through, but also helping them develop their own net zero action plans. And I did just want to highlight that at the beginning of the year, Natick released their net zero action plan, which is a good example of the type of work that we've been doing with communities. And I think a good reference point just to kind of see how the playbook resources can translate to a plan. And I'm happy to also talk more about the planning processes that we did with those 3 communities and other projects that we're working on as well, to give you kind of more local context to some of the work that we've been doing with municipalities. So that's it. That was a lot of information, but wanted to just give kind of a primer across all the different resources that we have available to folks. You can check them all out at this link, and you can always reach me at this information if you want to have more in-depth conversation, but did want to have time and space to have a discussion with folks as well.
Megan, I commend you on your brevity and wit. I am sure you will have many questions, and you've left plenty of time for us to be able to have a conversation. So the first thing is, will we be able to distribute this presentation?
Yes, yeah, I'll send it as a PDF right after.
Okay, great. So Brianna, if you could distribute that to everybody, that would be helpful. I think maybe, can we post it on our site, or is there a link to your site that we can do just in case people are interested in net zero?
I don't have the presentation on our website, but you can definitely post it and link to our net zero resources too. Those are all on the website. Okay,
so that might be a nice addition to our website as well, just to start the conversation about net zero goals and what it would mean for Cohasset. All right, great. Thank you very much again. So I'll open this up for conversation. And Pat,
Yeah, hi Megan. Pat Gooding here. Thank you very much for coming and speaking to us today. I did take a little bit of a glance at your website previously, but this was a lot more thorough information. One of the things I was curious about was as part of your inventory tool, where you can gather all the greenhouse gas information. Do you know if any of that is compatible with the Mass Energy Insight data that's collected for the towns?
Yeah. So one of our priorities with developing that tool was there were all these national frameworks for how to collect the data and how to use that, but nothing that brought it back to Massachusetts in terms of where you'd actually go to get that. So one of the data sets that we refer communities to is to pull information from Mass Energy Insight specific to your municipal operations to be able to quantify those emissions for your municipality.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Do you have a question?
Recording in progress.
Oh, Steve, you're on double, so if you could put yourself on mute or hang up your phone. Okay, perfect. Any other questions for Megan?
I guess I can ask one more question if nobody else has. So Megan, this is a particular area of interest for me and trying to get started with some of this information. What do you have any sense, given the towns that you've worked with? We're a pretty small town. We're about 8,000 people. What have you noticed to be the most successful ways of people getting started? How many people do you need to begin collecting this? Just some rules of the road if you have some experience.
Yeah. Specifically for the inventory or more broadly for the planning?
More broadly, I was thinking about, just getting the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we were kind of seeking to support for developing both the GHG inventory tool and the playbook was to make this something that would be accessible and doable and achievable for a volunteer-based committee structure, because our work with municipalities over the years really varies in terms of who our point of contact is. In some cases, it's an energy manager or sustainability director, but a lot more often we're working directly with folks like you, and wanted to create resources that would enable you to be able to develop these plans. Probably not necessarily completely on your own. It helps to have, I think, our team or another consultant to help out with managing that full engagement process. I think that is generally one of the more time intensive components of the net zero plans that we're doing with communities is doing that stakeholder analysis, mapping that out and developing a robust engagement plan that's using a variety of different techniques. And now that we're in this remote hybrid space, helping think through strategies that will still keep people engaged in the planning efforts and actually conducting that engagement work. But I think we've seen a lot of communities be successful in completing the inventories on their own without our help, using the tools that we've developed. So that's definitely something that's doable with a group of your size and kind of allocating different responsibilities in terms of data collection. And then on the sort of plan implementation side, I think one of the things that we can help you think through is how to build up the capacity that you might need to actually do the actions. Some of that can be done through a volunteer committee structure, but it definitely does help to have dedicated staff people that can move those initiatives forward too.
As far as funding goes, is there really funding required to begin starting the plan, or can you more or less do this as a volunteer effort?
It all depends on I think the time commitment that volunteer committees want to bring to the table. I think I've seen it done entirely volunteer led. I think it helps to have municipal staff bought in and involved, because ultimately you need them to be partners in terms of implementing and getting things done. But there is funding available for like these larger climate action planning processes. And some of those main pots of funding that we've been helping communities access are through the state's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, and their action and planning grants have been in recent years more open to funding climate action planning or climate resiliency planning that has a mitigation component to it. Another source of funding that we've been utilizing a lot more in the past few years is the planning assistance grants that are available through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, or EEA. And both of those grants are on sort of a mid to late spring time scale. So this is a great time to be starting a conversation about what you are interested in, what you're thinking about, so that you can be kind of prepared for that spring cycle. And then the other way that we've been working with communities is, since we are a public agency, we can contract directly with our cities and towns for work that you would like to do without having to do a full procurement process for a consultant. So some of the ways we've been kicking off work with communities is to do an initial first phase of a smaller kind of fee-for-service contract, and then support communities in actually applying for those larger pots of funding to support the planning efforts too.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Megan, what's the timing? Like from the time you conceptually say, okay, here's a group of people who want to make this happen, to town approval of a plan. How many years are you thinking this, or months or decades?
Yeah. Well, luckily none of the plans I've worked on have taken decades. I'd say we've done plans that had initial timeframes of under a year, but then they always end up needing a little bit more time than that. So I think more comfortably like a year to a year and a half for a planning process, from kind of scoping to completion of the plan, and then adoption, depending on the body that you're pulling it through, may take a little bit more time after that too.
So a total of 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, 2 to 3 years.
Okay, great. Any other questions from Megan?
I have one quick question. So the town of Cohasset actually received some funding to do a greenhouse gas inventory from MAPC. We
Yes.
didn't receive the funding, but it was the Regional Energy Planning Assistance funding.
Yep.
I didn't know if you had any updates on that timeline, and if it was submitted to DOER and what that's looking like.
Yes. So I think you may have whoever we were in communication with may have gotten an email from Kara yesterday that we did get awarded for all of the funding that we applied for, which is fantastic. So we're able to do all of those projects. The grant itself runs from basically when we get the contract signed, hopefully as soon as possible, to May 2023. So we are currently kind of assessing over that 1.5 year period when specific projects will be taking place. So definitely let Kara know if you have specific kind of timing constraints. We know that everyone wants to start as soon as possible, but with the staffing on our team, that's not going to be possible. So we are going to have to kind of pace things out over the grant period.
That's all right. I'm glad you got the funding.
Yeah, we were a little surprised, but very excited to get all of the projects funded. So that's another pot of funding that just opened up this year in terms of net zero resources. Previously, Green Communities was just funding things related to the Green Communities program, and they've opened it up this year to fund more of these kind of smaller net zero related projects with communities.
Great. So since this just came out, Brianna, this would fall under things not reasonably known in advance. So maybe you can give us a little bit more detail about what the grant is and how we can spend the money and how we might fit it into some of our other initiatives. Megan, separately, we would love to figure out how to work with you on an upcoming FEMA brick grant. Our select board voted yes for the town manager to take the lead on, with assistance from the relevant parties and people in the town, to proceed with a brick grant to fund a microgrid project in Cohasset. We're trying to determine what level of of microgrid to do, but we'd love to follow up with you on the technical assistance with respect to putting that together, because I think we definitely need it and there's some tight timeframes happening. But I think MAPC is a great resource, and we want to thank you for all you do for the towns and municipalities and allowing us to move forward with planning and taking action.
Awesome. That sounds great. One other thing I just mentioned on the inventory, for instance, there were some questions on that, is we do have a recording of a training that I did last summer, I think, that goes way more in depth on the greenhouse gas inventory tool and how to use it and what data sets are required for the inventory. So that is a resource that you can check out if you want to dive in more in depth on that too.
Great. All right, Megan, thank you so much for coming. You can stay. It's a public meeting, open meeting, or I'm sure you have other things to do at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night, but you're welcome to stay. You're also welcome to go. Thank you again. You're also welcome to take yourself out and just listen in, whatever works for you. But thank you again for coming and presenting. If everybody take yourself off of mute.
Thank you all. It's really nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you too.
Have a good rest of the evening. Bye.
All right, so if we could take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to discuss net zero goals, and Pat, if you want to take the lead on this.
Sure. So not a whole lot has happened since we met the last time. There's a lot of vacations going on. I did copy you, Tanya, an email that I received today. I've spoken to Diane Kennedy and some other folks that are involved in the master plan implementation. So I think the direction we're trying to move towards is to bring the various committees that might have a piece in this effort together to have a joint meeting to figure out, are there some things that we could be, communicating, coordinating better. For example, the master plan specifically has goals in it related to all the work that we're doing, pretty much. So when you look at the priorities that are being focused on for year 1 and year 2, they don't specifically call out the energy related things that we're working on. There are other priorities. However, we know we're working on those things, which will help to fulfill those goals. So there are other aspects of the master plan that include looking at a net zero plan, although it's kind of weakly worded in there as a strategy. I think it could be, discussed as to how we can go about fulfilling on that in conjunction with the master plan implementation committee. So I think the next step there is to try to coordinate across the various committees, somebody from our committee, master planning committee, maybe it's open space and rec, and other committees that might have a role here to figure out, do we start working under the guidance of the master plan and have it be a piece of that? Does it become a subcommittee of that? Does it, how do we form something that can move this forward? So it's slow and moving, but discussions are happening. I think in just listening to all the tools that we have out there at our disposal, I'm happy to go in and start looking at these tools and start gathering some data and putting it, to the best of my ability, starting looking at some of this stuff just to get the conversation started. And then we move forward from there and figure out what the next step is. I think this is going to be a very iterative process till we can get a recommendation, and that probably won't be just an AEC recommendation, probably be broader than that is my thinking at this point in time. But as always, I'd love to hear from all of you, your thoughts and recommendations, things that make sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, will we ultimately need any kind of warrant article to support this objective or not?
I think that's what Megan was talking about, to the point where once you've got a plan, if you want to, the town wants to adopt it, we're going to have to do that work to get it adopted, right? So I think that's where a warrant article may come in. Originally, when I started discussing this with the folks from Hingham, they were, very adamant that, you really ought to go to your select board and ask them to create a committee, basically a committee to go after this and just get started because it's a good time to do it. But in talking this through with Diane, she was just relating how difficult it is with having so many different committees. And as I just pointed out, we're not all coordinated. We don't all know what each other are doing, and we may have some slight overlap, or we could be helping each other in more effective ways. So I didn't continue to pursue that of asking for a warrant article to create a committee for that reason, because I trust Diane's guidance in that respect. If it comes down the road that, that ends up the way that we all think is the right way to go, we can look at that again, certainly. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Pretty much. I just want to make sure whatever we end up with in a plan, that there's no ambiguity, that the objective is to reach carbon neutrality, net zero by 2050 or something. And none of this nonsense about we're not going to try to discourage fossil fuel consumption, which is exactly what we will be doing. So,
well, I think the tools and the inventories and all of the kits that MAPC is bringing to the table make that pretty clear. People may argue what the timeline is or how you get there, but I think that's pretty clear. That's the goal, right?
okay.
Any other
Anybody
questions
else?
or comments for Pat? All right, well, Pat, I think I most certainly, it's helpful to have more exploration and more research. So if we as a committee want to put that support behind Pat, I'd entertain a motion to move forward with getting more information to get to a point where we can make a recommendation to the select board about whether or not we should continue to proceed with additional information and movement towards a plan.
Your motion seems a little vague.
Well, you can feel free to make your own motion. But I mean, just look at, we don't have authority to pursue a plan unless we have the authority of the select board to do so. So I don't think right now we have enough information to make a proposal to the select board, but if we do, then we can hear about it at the next meeting or the next two meetings. And if we feel like there's more research to be had, that would be the basis of the motion, to try to get more information.
I don't know if we need a motion then. How about just an action item to ask Pat to please pursue this with the other town committees and come to some consensus with the other committees as to what we would like to present to the select board in the way of a plan, maybe.
Okay, are you
Do we need,
comfortable
do we
with
need
that?
I'm
We
not
don't
sure
need to vote on
vote.
an action item. Pat, are you comfortable with that as an action item?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So Debbie, if you can make that an action item with a box, we love those. That's how we get stuff done in this committee. So, all right, great. Pat, thank you for taking the lead on this and being the champion. And Brianna, thank you for helping us make that connection with MAPC so that we could have Megan come speak to us. And if you could put on your to-do list a range of follow-up call with Megan and MAPC regarding assistance, technical assistance for pursuing the BRIC grant. I think it'd be great to get them working with us sooner rather than later so that we understand what needs to be done. And that is in light of the select board's approval, which we'll talk about in a moment. All right, great. Thank you, everybody. So the next item is our grants. We love grants. So we can start with the brick grant. This past Tuesday and 2 weeks before that, I presented to the select board about the brick grant opportunity. I think we had previously mentioned that this was something that was coming forward, and we were able to, when it came out in August, we were able to, get more information. Brianna did a great memo summarizing what the deadlines are, what's required. It is not easy to do a federal grant, but this is a lot of money that could allow us to pursue something we've been talking about for a while, which is some type of microgrid that would improve our reliability and resiliency. Microgrid is one of the recommendations from the MVP study, and a lot of the other recommendations on how to improve our power supply have either been tried or aren't feasible or don't work. So on Tuesday, the select board voted to have the town manager move forward with pursuing the brick grant and to lever and capitalize upon the talents that are in the town, including on the committees and including the Alternative Energy Committee was mentioned by name, so that we can move forward. We have had a lot of meetings to date on that, including one this morning with National Grid that we'll give you an update on. But I think we have a very good chance. We are still trying to figure out from National Grid where they're willing to go. We've sort of laid out for them our 4 phases from the conceptual framework that we approved in May of 2020. If we want to do something that crosses a public right of way that utilizes the National Grid distribution system to connect multiple microgrids, then we have to have National Grid on board. But we have to have National Grid involved anyway, because regardless of what we do, there's going to be an interconnection study and potentially an interconnection cost. So National Grid is our best friend. And they've been fabulous and great and very collaborative, and very appreciative of their teaming. And there are a number of other players that you may have seen on the page with the logos, a number of other players who we've been talking to either specifically as part of the microgrid opportunity or in other ways. So we have the permission for the town manager to pursue the brick grant from the select board as of Tuesday. And now we've just got to keep moving forward. Brianna, you've done a lot of work on this. Do you have anything to add on the brick grant?
Well, would you like me to forward that memo to everyone on the committee?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Feel free to
Okay,
forward
so
the
I'll-
memo.
I'll forward you a memo. Oh, what? My internet cut out.
Yes, please.
Okay, because, and just so you all know, the memo kind of has all the deadlines listed in it. So October 15th, if we want to submit the brick grant at all, before that date, we have to have a statement of interest submitted to the state of Massachusetts. And once we get it submitted, we'll get help from the state, and they'll work with us to make sure our project is eligible and that our project is something that they want to submit to FEMA. They are the applicant and we are the sub-applicant, which is something I did not understand last year. So I'm glad that we're on it. I went to another webinar today for it, and we seem to be going on the right track, and all of our information so far is following the right path. So that's good.
And everybody should have received a copy of the 2 presentations that were made to the select board. I emailed those, I think, to everybody on the committee. Is that, yes? Remember
Yes.
seeing 2 presentations? Okay, perfect. So that gives some nice, high level background and identifies who our potential partners are and what the potential options are. I will be honest, the driver is National Grid. What phase we can move to, we're perfectly positioned to do phase 1, which is the 2 microgrids that the Mass CEC study grant is looking at. I don't think it's exciting enough for Massachusetts or FEMA. Phase 2, which would build out more microgrids, including a school campus, potentially the Stop and Shop shopping center, to make sure that they can be up and running when we have an outage, so people can get gas, people can get food, and supplies. That is a potential, another microgrid campus. There's like 8 that we could do. And I think part of the initial piece of it is figuring out what we want to move forward with if phase 2 is as far as we can go. And phase 3, as I said, would be basically a downtown microgrid, something originally designed by our dear friend Steve Girardi in 2015, 6 years ago, which we keep reminding National Grid about. And phase 4 would be the entire town. That seems to be a bit too far for National Grid, I'll be honest. They're not, it's very innovative. We'd be the first town to ever do it. And I think it's a little too scary and they're not really set up for it. But phase 3, a downtown microgrid, seems to be more comforting for them. So we've now talked to multiple levels at National Grid. And again, they've been very collaborative. They're going to get back to us hopefully next week on how far they think they can go with us to put forward a winning proposal. All right, any questions about the brick grant?
Are you going to speak later, Tanya, to the interconnection issue?
Yes, we'll talk about the solar energy arrays.
Okay.
We'll talk about that, and we have great news on that, by the way. So stay tuned. Don't turn your dial. Okay, so that's the brick grant. Mass CEC study grant. Brianna.
Yes, so the Mass CEC study grant, we're still expecting to receive it at the end of September. I believe, so I'm trying to find the email I got today. So Mass CEC provided their feedback and then they submitted the report to GE and Nexant, and they're providing their comments, and then they pass it back and forth one more time, and then it's finalized enough to get to us, and we'll be able to give our comments. So we're going to see it hopefully 2 weeks from now, and that's an overestimation. They think that by the end of next week it'll be done. They're using this week to write their comments up. So it is moving. Yeah, the holdup, we've passed the place where we were held up.
Great, good. Thank you. Any questions about the Mass CEC study grant? Remember, this is looking at 2 sites, a DPW site with electric school buses as an energy storage, mobile energy storage solution, and the police fire station in Harborview, which is separated by a private driveway. And therefore we could connect them with wiring without violating a National Grid public right-of-way franchise service territory right. That is very interesting because it does address our most vulnerable and emergency response at the same time. I also did learn from Taffy Nothnagel that the town owns those buildings. And at one point, I was under the impression that the state owned the Harborview units, but Taffy has said the belief now is that the town actually owns those buildings and therefore would be able to make decisions with respect to roof replacement and solar panels. So there's potentially legs on both of those projects. All right, green communities. Do we have anything on that, Brianna, the green communities grants?
I don't.
Okay, did we submit something this year for the schools?
As far as I know, they're still working on that money, and that's due in December.
Okay, cool. And they, meaning?
Michelle.
Okay, good, perfect. Pat, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm okay. I believe that there was an email today about green communities grants. It sounded like new ones. Brianna, did you see that?
I saw that you had forwarded me an email. I wasn't on a green communities email.
Okay, well, I'll double check it, but I think I don't know where we stand with being able to apply for additional money through green communities. And I do know they also are offering the Meta grant, technical assistance grant again, which is we've used in the past to help with some of these energy initiatives. It basically gets you to fund payroll for people like you, Brianna. So to help with putting together, gathering data, collecting stuff for the energy related work. So I will take another look at that and circulate it. I think it sounded like that was new. They were new grants that you could apply for.
And we are still eligible to keep applying for the Green Communities grants. I believe it's a regular amount that we get every year with the town.
Yeah, they put these restrictions on such that you have to have used all the money associated with, former funding or whatever by a certain date before you can apply for additional funds. So you have to look at them kind of closely.
Am I right? I think that the funds available for the Green Communities grants change from year to year. And now that there are even more communities that are green communities, that the funds are spread more thinly. So we probably can't expect to get the same level of grants that we have in the past.
Yeah.
Well, let's try to get what we can get, but it sounds like Michelle is on it. And we did do a walkthrough to make sure we had spent all the money and it was seen as having been spent last year. So I think we are wide open and ready to go.
We might want to get our grants in sooner rather than later, because I've heard some scuttlebutt that Green Communities, the Baker administration is causing some delays in green community grant applications. And so maybe we could be to our advantage to get them in sooner.
I agree with that. Brianna, can we make that an action item for you to just let Michelle know that Steve has heard some scuttlebutt, that sooner rather than later? The early bird may catch the worm in this case.
Yes, I'll talk to Michelle.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, thank you on our grants. Anything else on grants? I guess, Brianna, do you want to talk about the grant that the email had just come in from MAPC that they had received funding?
Sure, and that's the grant that we've already been approved to receive. So we reported on it, it was a couple of months ago now. It's $3,000 to do a greenhouse gas inventory from MAPC. It's the technical assistance, and then they already have that free tool online, which will all be helpful. But we don't have much information on the grant itself. It's like a one-page thing. It's a part Zero Playbook program.
Okay, perfect. Okay, update on 2021 initiatives. Some of these we're going to go very quickly through. Community solar. I don't think there's anything to update on that.
No,
but
is there anything we should do with community solar before our other solar projects are under
yes.
more firm footing?
Yeah, look, I think as I'm trying to think through how do we make the 25% match for the brick grant, an obvious way to do that would be to get 75% of funding to install solar and batteries in town from the federal government and have the other 25% more or less paid for by citizens who are buying very inexpensive power, basically subsidized power. I don't know if that would be eligible. We have to look into it, but I do know that the brick grants have been funding batteries. I don't know what they've been doing on the solar side, and maybe it's not the full 75% we go for because there's already a 26% federal ITC tax credit that helps defray the cost. But you basically, with a 75% funding of the capital costs, you could get the cost of electricity, I'm estimating, down to 3 cents or 4 cents versus what some people are paying, which is like 12 cents. So it would take us down below market. And it might make it very attractive for residents in this town to sign up as part of a community solar project where 75% is funded by the federal government and 25% is funded by the town with an upfront enterprise fund that then collects for the bond payments through payments from the residents. I hope that doesn't sound too confusing. I'm really trying to figure out how to get people to pony up for that 25% in a way that makes sense. So there's a win-win-win for everybody. So it seems to me community solar could be the way. And I think that there are plenty of people, not just the town, and it would be a cheaper price than what we received in our bids, but also residents who could benefit from this type of arrangement. And we get solar built in town, whether it's at the MBTA station, the shopping centers, the school properties, the town properties, but it could get it built. And I think we would do it under the guise of community solar, because that is an acceptable program, as opposed to waiting for like community aggregation. It's sort of the same thing as community aggregation, but it's just a cheaper version because we're getting 75% subsidized by.
Wasn't our original idea to use community solar to take some of the demand, the excess load or demand production from our solar projects in town?
Yes.
But we have to actually pursue that and talk to our developers about it. Don't we have to actually have our solar projects in hand, or be well progressed along that way?
No, it's a chicken egg. It's a chicken egg problem. The way that Amoresco does it, if they do community solar, is they want the town to take a certain 50% chunk of the commitment. So they have the anchor tenant, it's called, in the form of the town. And then the other 50% of the energy can go to residents who sign up.
But we have to have they have to have a project. We have to have identified a site where we, we have to overcome the interconnect problem first, I guess is what I'm saying.
We have overcome that. And, and we'll
great.
talk about that in a moment.
Oh,
That is our good news from this morning. But we do have to overcome the interconnect problem. I think we have overcome that. We do have plenty of sites to choose from because of the RFP. And if we put those forward as part of the, and the private sites can move forward without anything, right? But the private sites can move forward as a community solar project tomorrow.
Well, what do we have to do to move forward with the community solar idea?
Well, I think we have to decide. So economically, it's going to be a hard sell for us to convince people in town to buy the solar from community solar using just the 26% ITC in the state incentives, which we don't even know if we can get. But I think it's a much more economic, it's like almost a no-brainer to offer to the town energy that's at a price that covers that last 25%, if the other 75% is paid for by the BRIC grants. So I think we have to figure out what is the economics. Sorry, my little puppy is on my lap. What are the economics and how do we, which is the path we want to pursue? And given the BRIC grant, I think the problem with community solar under the existing approach is that the state credits for residents are not rich enough to make it worthwhile. So the residential net metering credits are not great, and they don't make it a no-brainer to buy the energy. There may be still some people who are willing to do it because it's local and they're already buying 100%, and it could be cheaper than that, but they lose the opportunity, for example, to buy into a community aggregation, which could come in at a lower price. In contrast, if we went forward with the BRIC grant as a 75% subsidy from the federal government, if that is allowed, and we're going to check into that, it's a no-brainer. Like, instead of paying your 12 cents for energy or 6 cents, 8 cents, you're paying 3 to 4 cents because it's that much cheaper. And we don't rely on state subsidies. We just rely on the BRIC grant as the 75% subsidy versus what would be the equivalent of maybe a 30
if we get the BRIC grant, does that mean then we go to Amoresco and saying, hey, we got this BRIC grant, we're very confident that residents are going to you know, with this grant, that residents are going to want to participate in a community solar.
We don't wait till we get the brick grant. We're set up, or Brianna's setting up a meeting for us to talk to the developers, the 3 developers that we've chosen to work with, Amoresco and Select and Palmer. And we're gonna talk to all of them and say, we're pursuing this brick grant. Here's what we're thinking. Here's what we want to do. Does this work for you?
Okay,
Would you be willing to do this if we got 75% of your capital costs paid for by the government, not 26% through the ITC,
Okay.
but 75%.
then they
So
would
they're
be
going to
less,
be on board.
then they would be less worried that there would be enough subscribers to community solar to take the reduction. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because the
Okay.
economics make it a no-brainer.
Okay, yeah. Think I got it.
So we'd have them work with us on the brick grants, get a new set of pricing for the third-party sites, which don't require an RFP process. And then we could figure out if we want to do some surveys, talk to people, get some people to sign up in advance of the brick grant, or just assume we're going to get that because of the pricing and move it forward like that. Again, this is conceptual. We have a lot of boxes to check to make sure we can do this, but I know for a fact the brick grants have been used to help build sustainable projects, and microgrids are part of the sustainable projects that they explicitly pull out, and microgrids need generation,
Mhm.
not just distribution wires. So that's how I'm thinking of rolling community solar into the microgrid grant.
Tanya, would you like me to reach out to David about that? To see
David,
what's up?
sorry,
From-
David.
From FEMA, David Woodbury.
Yes. If you know what, if you could set up a meeting, and I think I'm happy to be on that meeting to sort of explain conceptually what we're thinking. The key thing is we already know these sites exist. We already know they're viable projects. It's more than the town can buy
Okay.
under the state program. And so we can ask him, you know, is this the type of project you guys would look at for funding? And then we'd have the residents subscribe. And the way we could do it as a town is we put the capital up front. It's an enterprise fund. We collect the money out back. And the credits from those sites are allocated to the people who sign up. So they pay $1 and they get $1.50 back on their electricity bill. That's basically what it would be. And we can pencil out what it is, but you know, pay the town $1 and you get a $2 credit on your bill. I don't know. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me, and I think people are pretty smart to be able to figure out what it means. It's just they might think it's too good to be true. All right, but yeah, let's figure that out, because we don't want to put that into the proposal unless we've got understanding up front that that is the type of thing that they could get their arms around and fund. Okay, and obviously Amoresco has done it, and I think, you know, with the town covering half of each of the projects, basically the town would put our buying bulk behind half of each of whatever we build. That's the anchor tenant, and then people in town get the benefit of the rest of it. Okay, electric buses. No progress. I mean, I don't want to say no progress on this. The progress is basically the Mass CEC study is going to address this and the incremental costs and whether it can be done to use electric buses as mobile storage. Capital budget has been, you know, following and listening to our speakers that have come in to talk about electric buses. And I think it's just time to start getting some ideas about what this is going to cost. And I think the Mass CEC study should identify those costs. And then again, for that, if we can get 75% of the incremental cost paid for by the federal government, we might be able to get the other 25% from the state or maybe even the town. This might be part of the 25% that the town pays for, knowing the maintenance costs are lower on an ongoing basis. Okay, electric municipalization. This has been placed on hold, but it is mentioned every time we talk to National Grid. Because they don't want it to happen. And I think it's clear to them how just how upset people are in this town whenever we talk about it. So we're not using it like as a threat. We're just saying this is something we've been asked to look at. But we aren't looking at it yet. We're going to be focusing on going forward in a friendly way, but it's always an option. If we don't have any other way in the back of Cinto Corner, that's our nucleant final escape hatch. But I think that's not the first approach to try to take. That's sort of the last resort. Okay.
But don't you think we should still look at it as like a backup?
Yeah, I do. So the question is, what do we want to do to move forward on this? Do we have some action items for this? Should we start doing it now? Do we want to wait until after we submit the brick grant? Do we want to?
I would start looking at it now at a 60,000 foot level and kind of do an asset collection. Just take a look. That's all. Because,
Okay.
I just think it's just something worth doing would be,
Yeah. So Brianna's reaching out to what I call the Brain Trust. Those are our electrical engineers that we're so happy to have on board. And I think when we talk about what a microgrid would look like, that conversation can also talk about theoretically how we would go about trying to understand this, and then what the next steps would be. And like I said, we do have funding in the budget for this. So I think it's just a question of bandwidth.
I just think it's, if worst comes to worst, it's easy to do stuff as a light plant at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, spoken like a true light plant guy.
Well, but you think about like last night when the select board had talked about all the stuff people will lose, all the grants. Well, everybody's paying it through their rate right now as we speak. So you don't lose. So, I just think it's something to look at. We're in a perfect spot for it. I mean, geographically.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
all right.
So let's have the and if the engineers are uncomfortable talking about it, I totally understand why that might be the case, then that's fine too. But let's sort of tag that on to the microgrid discussion. And then specifically, Tyler, if this creates discomfort just because of your position at Eversource or other, you can fall off and we can have the conversation with Steve and Mike. But more the merrier on this one to talk about next steps and how to start moving forward.
Yeah, I can start in the discussions and we'll see how it goes.
Okay. And I am very sensitive, by the way, that as much as I love saying, oh yeah, don't worry, National Grid, I've got my electrical engineers that I'll run this by. I don't want to abuse that. And I don't want to put any of you in a bad position with respect to your day job. So just open communication and feel free to, tell me, oh, that goes a little bit too far. I can't help you here, but I can help you here. And Jean, you have your hand up.
I think she's having problems with audio. So,
Oh, no.
yeah, so she was just saying in a chat that she thinks it's wise to keep the options open.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I think Mike was looking into just a case study on this with, I think it was a town of Harvard or somebody. So I think if we keep it on the down low and just keep understanding what's involved in doing this, we'd be well positioned if other things don't go the way we'd like them to. You know,
Yeah, no reason not to do parallel paths. Do we have a speaker, Mike? Did you find a speaker for us to talk through what it takes, how you do it?
Yeah, I was in contact with the CEO of Energy New England. He's given multiple presentations to some towns recently on municipalization, and he's happy to speak with us whenever. He's a great resource. I'm happy to set that up. Just let me know when, and I'll try to coordinate the dates.
That'd be great. So if you could coordinate with Brianna, I think the next meeting, do we have a speaker, the next meeting lined up? I think we do
No,
not.
but I didn't know if you wanted someone from the Mass CEC study to come talk with all of us.
Oh yeah, because by then we'll have it done. Okay, yeah, so I think this works. Mike, if you could ask him whether he'd be available the second Thursday in November.
Okay.
And actually, this is far enough out that if people are amenable, if he can't do the second Thursday, which is November 11th.
Yep.
Is that Veterans Day?
Yes.
Okay, so we can't do it on November 11th anyway. Once you ask him if November 4th or November 18th works better,
Okay.
and we'll take whichever one of those dates. That's the Thursday before Thanksgiving. How do people feel about that if it's on the 18th?
That's just a week before Thanksgiving.
It's the week
Should be
before
fine.
Thanksgiving. I think it's fine. So ask him if the 4th or the 18th works better for him, and we'll just schedule our meeting around whatever would work for him.
Okay.
Okay, so
Sounds good. I'll let you know.
Thursday, November 4th or 18th.
Okay.
And then we'll book our meeting based on that. And the
And then he
meeting
would,
notes.
how much time would he have? Are we doing like the half hour before?
We're trying to keep it to half an hour just so we can get our other stuff done
Okay.
within a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
But if he needs, look, a TED Talk is done in 18 to 20 minutes. So
yeah,
I think half an hour should give plenty of time.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Thank you for keeping the ball rolling on that. Town hall renovation. Do we have an update on that?
I think where we left this, Tanya, was that Michelle was going to loop us in as needed. So I'm not currently going to any of the meetings because there's really no input that I can give. So I think Michelle's looking to pull us in as needed.
Okay, and I think they have asked for us to be involved, and Michelle has told them we don't have the capability in the geothermal area. My understanding is they are continuing to pursue geothermal at the Common. And that is something that we could roll into the BRIC grant as part of the sustainability microgrid. So of course, if you're relying on geothermal, you need less energy. So it's all part of the whole package. And I think we could get 75% of that paid for. I think that's a nice project if they have somebody who can do the research. And I think Brian Host has done a significant amount of research on that to try to understand what might be in the realm of possibility. Okay. Go electric. Debbie, what is happening?
Well, actually, I have to say we've been sort of on hiatus. This is a working committee, and I think the workers kind of needed a break for a couple of weeks this summer. So we are going to get kicked into gear and get started. So Steve and I actually were chatting about it today, and anyway, so next time hopefully we will be making some good progress. But I will say that, you know, something like the Go Electric project really brings home the point of really sort of needing some, you know, projects that really work the best is having some paid personnel. I mean, that to fit under some sort of a sustainability area with some paid staff, because it's, you know, the thing is it's just as good as the volunteers who have to do the work and are trying to, do their other lives. So things move slower than we hope. So anyway.
Okay,
But
good
Debbie,
update.
just to not steal your thunder, but you've done a great job on the website, and maybe you could just send a link around to everybody so that they can see what's been done, because I'm not sure everybody's seen some of the work that that group's done.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I put that in actually at the last minutes, and I will send it along separately. And hopefully people can really see where we are, because we really have done a fair amount of work. Many thanks to Pat and Steve and the other gang. So I will send that along.
And feel free to put the link again in the meeting minutes
Okay,
under this conversation.
okay, will do.
Great. All right, updates on the 2020 initiatives. This is our good news. So the solar energy RFP, as you know, got ground to a halt. Not just because the sites have hair and warts and issues that we're trying to unwind, but thanks to Select Energy, who we asked to pursue the school roofs, even though we weren't sure that the school roofs could take the solar energy array because they need to be replaced, but the state keeps pushing off the date of replacement. Select, to their credit, did move forward, and they're the only developer who put that project into the queue. By putting it into the queue, it was in National Grid's queue. National Grid looked at it and did a study to understand what the interconnection costs would be. And they came back, and Select reported back to us, oh, it's tough. Can we do this? Can we do that? To the other. But basically, there was an interconnection cost, which had a certain amount of money, not a lot, to connect at Sawyer Street. Because if you look at the National Grid distribution line, it does say there's plenty of capacity for connection at Sawyer Street, that we could connect up to 5 megawatts. And we're talking about 500 kilowatts, so half a megawatt. So 10% of what, according to the National Grid map, we could put on there. The problem was not the connection to Sawyer. The problem was there were a bunch of common costs to the tune of $500,000 at the Norwell substation. And Steve Girardi can talk about why it was going to be so expensive. But this morning, Brianna and Steve and I did a call with National Grid and their technical team, including the team who had done the study. These are also the members of the technical team who, if National Grid decides to move forward, will help to design the microgrid that National Grid's comfortable moving forward with as part of the BRIC grant. So it was nice to meet them. And who wants to give the good news? Brianna or Steve, do you want to tell this lofty committee what happened this morning? Because we did a victory lap.
I feel like this is your news to share.
Just go. They don't know.
They're hoping that they are going to assume those costs for us. Basically, they're not going to end up on our project, and they're hoping to replace that substation within 1 to 2 years, is what they told us. So we'll see.
So they basically looked back at their study, and since they did the study, some of the people who were in the queue dropped out. Some of the other projects that they were anticipating aren't there anymore. And then they looked at what was already online, and they discovered that, in fact, this was already a problem. It was not a problem created by us in our project. It was already a problem created by everything that was already on the system. And because it was already a problem, it was their problem to fix. And so they've already designed what they would have to do to fix that problem. And by doing that, and Steve can tell you what it is, but by doing that, we would basically be able to put solar in town and not have to pay for the common costs of the Norwell substation.
Great news.
So
Oh,
I don't-
unrelated things, that Palmer Capital, is anything more about the landfill expansion, the solar array there? Are they still having trouble with their inverter or whatever?
So we have asked, or Brianna's reaching out to the developers, Palmer and Select and Amoresco, for us to talk to them about the microgrid project. And, you know, obviously we continue to eye the existing old landfill because that's an obvious site to put more plus battery plus mobile charging buses or whatever. So we do not know if it's been fixed, but we have an upcoming meeting where we can ask them.
So I would have to say with today, those engineers from National Grid, they were hot tickets. They were, I could relate what they were saying. I said the only downfall is really it's not within the substation, it's outside of the substation. It's the 115 lines that come from Brockton through Norwell to Situate, and they have to add a protection scheme since the lines are already saturated with DG distribution. So, I think that's going to be the long haul. Up to 2 years. It could be 3 years. We just got to stay on top of them, because once you get into the transmission work, it's a lot different than working within the station, because there's line outages and you have to, coordinate with ISO New England and talk about possible interruption of services, blah blah blah. So, but overall, it's it was a good conversation. I found the reason why I get hard faults in my house, so I was good.
Steve was awesome. It's always great to have an electrical engineer on the call. I have to tell you, it was awesome.
Because I did complain, because I said, listen, when the fuse blew at Windy Hill, my house was like something out of The Shining. And it's the lack of available fault currents, and that's a lot of it's to do with a lot of like the solar and DG that's interconnected into the system. Like I think maybe Tyler could even speak to, if he knows the Cape at all. They have issues with fault current, not enough fault currents available down the Cape because of all the DG interconnected. Tyler, am I right?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot more DG down there than they actually really need. So yeah, you're right.
What's DG?
Solar
Distributed
batteries.
generation.
Oh, okay.
Because what happens that it's like all the DG can wreak havoc on the electrical system, and honestly, from like my house, you could so tell there's not enough available fault current, because like I said, Windy Hill is on the obviously other side of Jerusalem Road, and my house is dipped so hard. When on the map 2 minutes later, there was a star at Windy Hill. So I got my answer, and it was due to the lack of fault current in the area.
So does this go back to, our overall concern about the reliability of our power in Cohasset? I mean, have we discovered a little bit more of the root cause of our problem other than we're at the end of the line? Or is this just not really the cause of it, but just another piece of the puzzle?
It's honestly, from an engineering standpoint, and Tyler could jump into on this one. It's not their fault. It's what's connected into the grid. Our biggest thing is trees.
Yeah.
That's in one of the last outages we had was a lightning strike against the pole. That you can't, it's Mother Nature. But as more DG gets interconnected, you get voltage issues. Then you get limited fault current, the fault current is so important to have to be able to trip a breaker. There's been some, like, even like Mike and I would text back and forth during like an event we see on our line. I mean, they get really violent. I mean, Mike, how many times have we gone back and forth? Like, oh my God, you just see that?
Yeah, the thing is, the systems are all built with, a generation and electricity flowed in one direction. So now all these people are putting solar and DG on these systems that weren't originally designed for that. And, the utilities are trying to, I guess, retrofit a lot of these systems, and a lot of it's learning too. A lot of, the utilities we're still learning all this. It's new, it's somewhat new, a lot of it. So, but that like Steve said, that's mostly caused a lot of like voltage issues. Your reliability issues are your trees and, older infrastructure and stuff like that.
Yeah, and in fact, on that point, National Grid, I love them, but they basically have 3 themes since 2015. The first is your problem's not as bad as you think it is. And here's the data to show you that. The second is we're not going to give up our franchise service territory rights. It's like, okay, we can stipulate to that. And the third is vegetation management. If you want to solve the problem, we have to cut down trees. And we're used to this now, so we keep talking to them. So they did show us some data, because on this microgrid, they're like, why are you doing the microgrid? Like, do you think this is what problem is this gonna solve? And I said, well, it's not just our problem about reliability, resiliency, it's an opportunity for you to understand how you set up this type of system. And exactly as Tyler said, nobody knows really how to do it. They're learning along the way. But they came loaded with bear to show us that the problem is not really the feeder line, that 70% of the outages that impact 300 people or more, and Brianna has the data, so we're going to actually do the analysis for anybody that has an outage. But they showed us data that, and we haven't cross-checked it, that 70% of the outages that impact 300 people or more in Cohasset are because of trees, for the most part, trees inside the lines in Cohasset. So if we had a microgrid and it's still above ground, we're still going to have that problem. But as we dug into it, those 300 outages are not major storm events. So that data was not about major storm events. That data was about non-major storm events. And in that case, they're able to come very quickly, and they showed us data that they can recover us very quickly, actually faster than the average of the surrounding towns, based on the data they showed us using City and Safety. Yeah, that's what they said. And again, as as Mark Twain said, there are liars and statistics, but we have the data, so we're going to cross-check that. But their point was, if you want to solve your problem, it's about vegetation management, not about a microgrid. And then we came back and said, look, if what you're telling us is 70% of the problems are when the trees fall in Cohasset, not in a storm, and you can come and make us recover quicker, then that's not a problem we need to solve, because you're already solving that problem. And by the way, vegetation management is part of what a utility does. And if that's what you need to do, then I think you should be doing it. And we're not going to get money from FEMA to do vegetation management. So it strikes us that the problem is the feeder lines. The problem is, if we can figure out where the trees are falling, maybe we put the line underneath, run a line. I don't know what the ledge is like, but run an underground line from the MBTA station and Cedar Street all the way downtown for a downtown microgrid, 2 miles of underground line. It's expensive, but if 75% of it's paid for, that for purposes of resiliency during storms, maybe that's part of the microgrid and hardening the system.
Yeah, the vegetation control is the biggest thing. Like in Hangar, we went heavy in 13, 14, and 15, and all the storms we had, we barely had big outages. Even on we consider like Tyler could say, like they consider a regular day a blue sky day. If a tree falls, we had a tree fall the other night. It was just a random tree. It happens, but no outage. It's just because of the wire we have in the air. So, but anyways, Glasses got a lot of trees.
And I do see, so Jean had asked, will a brick grant pay for underground lines? I just want to step in and say that today, after the National Grid call, I put in a question to David Woodbury from MEMA, and asked whether underground lines would be a part of an eligible microgrid project. So hopefully he'll get back to me and we'll know if that's something we could work in.
Yeah, and I think if we can show it's part of a cheaper solution, although it's expensive, but if what we're talking about is 2 miles of underground wire from our generation sources into the area that covers all of our emergency response, the schools, the police, fire, other, I think we can do a cost benefit analysis to show that even with that expensive underground, it's only for the part that we need to bring the energy to our emergency response centers. And that actually might be a better way to do it anyway, because it'd be a separate line in addition to what we currently have, and it could go. But this is all about design. So the Brain Trust is lined up or going to be lined up to start thinking through what we put into the BRIC grant to make a microgrid. And if it can cross public rights of way, that could be part of our solution, but it's only going to get funding if it's part of something sexy like a microgrid. If we did it as a standalone, hey, pay for all of our lines in Cohasset to be put underground, I guarantee you we would not get the funding. So we're really wrapping all of these things around the sexiness of a microgrid and justifying it in that way. And they are very clear based on Brianna's memo, you'll see they do not pay for regular maintenance. They do not pay for projects that have already been built. They do not pay for, sort of standard operations. So they would not pay for vegetation management. That is something that a utility should be doing to create reliability and resiliency. So we're wrapping it into a microgrid and we'll justify it in that way and we'll see, but we'll also see what the response to Brianna is. And I think we've got some nice charts from the National Grid presentation and from the data that we can put together, which shows just, there are very clustered parts. North Main Street's really bad with respect to the trees. But I do like the crying emojis. The struggle is real. Okay. Community aggregation.
Okay, so I spoke to John Rorik, our broker at Good Energy today. And so in a nutshell, no progress, but their lawyer is going to be speaking to DPU people next week. And he's hoping there'll be some kind of information that he can pass on to me at that point. We had a broader discussion about the problems with the Baker administration slow walking, not just aggregation, but also other programs, green communities, smart safe. It seems like there's it's a problem. And other people have also, in some of the groups I belong to, we've also had discussions about the similar things, that the Baker administration is not very enthusiastic about pursuing these green energy projects aggressively like we would hope. And they're not making good progress on the climate bill, the requirements of the roadmap bill. I also had a conversation with Joan Moschino about various things, including these issues, and she recognizes the problems. So anyways, that's kind of where we are here.
Good. Well, look, we might create our own community aggregation solution in the form of these
alternative, right?
Alternative. One of the issues, this whole voltage thing, and this is a problem, and we recognize this on the call this morning, depending on what National Grid wants to do vis-a-vis the microgrid, part of the solution may have to be some type of spinning turbine that can provide quick response and frequency, because the batteries and the solar, as Tyler said, they're just, when it's been a one-way system, it's been fine. And basically all of us turning on our lights suck the energy towards us and not a problem. But when it's a two-way system with solar and batteries and charging and discharging going back and forth. That's not the way the system was made. And in fact, in England, when they started getting more of that, their transformers were exploding because they had a type of transformer that definitely had to cool down, and they used to cool it down when they weren't using the energy. And because of the two-way flow, they didn't have chances to cool down. And so they were exploding. They had to replace all of their transformers at the feeder lines. We don't have those transformers, but we have other issues. And so that's where some of these problems are coming. So we did say to them that we would have to look at what is the solution. And I don't want to freak everybody out, but if it's a, you know, reciprocating engine that ultimately runs on a hydrogen natural gas blend or a diesel hydrogen blend or diesel or just hydrogen, you know, we have to think about that, because otherwise we could end up in the first response of these engineers that we talked to this morning, and I know this through inside channels, it's not from this morning, but their first response was, you can't do it. What Cohasset wants to do, you cannot do, because of this whole voltage sag and frequency problems tied to the two-way flow of energy that the system was not made to do. So again, I think it makes it a perfect demonstration project. Let's use this to figure out the problems and solve them. But that's, you know, easy for us to say and not a comfort zone for the engineers at National Grid who own the system. But we're
Yeah,
pushing.
I don't really understand what you're saying. You know, I mean, the batteries provide essentially instant power. So how's that different from a hydrogen generating turbine? I don't quite understand.
So Tanya did speak like an engineer right there. I give her credit.
I didn't even use the word inertia. There's no inertia, Steve.
There's no
Could you-
there's a push.
Could you explain it in layperson's?
So the most important part of a distribution system is the generation, and utilities have to maintain frequency of 60 hertz, and we have to maintain a voltage at your home at 240 plus or minus 5%. We cannot go below those thresholds. If our frequency goes to 62 hertz, things would be tripping offline left and right. So we have to maintain a 59.5 on the high and a 58.2 on the low. If we go out of those ranges, we trip offline, which is called an under frequency trip. And we test those every year, like I know we do, and Grid does the same thing. They test for all those treatment capability. If we had our own DG, it doesn't matter what it is. If we supplied a certain area with power and it's not good power quality, stuff would burn out. People lose a lot of the appliances. It could cause fires, etc.
Steve, could I ask you a question here? I've been involved in discussions about ISO New England and their plans for the Peabody peaker plant. And ISO New England came out with a study recently that said that that batteries are perfectly capable of taking the job of a peaker plant. Now, if ISO New England thinks that batteries can do the job of a gas-powered turbine, a peaker plant, why are we hearing something different from National Grid? I'm a bit confused about that.
So the difference between a peaker plant and a battery could discharge. You're right. It could discharge perfectly, instantaneously. You hit go, it's full juice on. The difference between a peaker plant and a battery is that a peaker plant can come offline and go offline because it's got its fuel source. The fuel source for a battery is the distribution system, which, you know, as example, if it's 2 megawatts out, it's 2 megawatts in to charge, which could, you know, it could strain the systems. And that's why it's important that you charge batteries in the middle
Well,
of the night where
I'm just a little bit puzzled as why ISO New England thinks that batteries can do the job.
they
That-
they can. It just, my experience with the batteries is just, it's 2 megawatts in, 2 megawatts out, and yeah, they're instantaneous power. But the problem with batteries is the batteries are only good for X amount of hours. Like,
Yeah,
the
right,
ones that-
right. Once they discharge, then there's nothing, right.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on load. Like, it could be, like for instance, Hingham is, 1 megawatt, 6 hours, 2 megawatts, 3 hours. And that's it. Once they drain, they're done.
Right.
Where a Pika can keep going. So that's the difference.
And I think the other thing is, Steve, to realize that this up and down frequency, so peakers come in and they shave the peak, and batteries can do that. But there's something called ancillary services, which is not about capacity or reliability. It's about being able to manage the dips on the frequency, or the dips on the sine curve of the electrons that are flowing. And so because the battery has to charge, it's not available to do that while it's charging. It's only
Correct.
available
Well,
to do
the
that when
reason
it's
I'm bringing it up
discharged.
is because some of these groups that we're trying to discourage the PVD peaker plant, and ISO New England seems to be saying that the job that the peaker plant is designed to do can be done perfectly adequately with a battery system.
But what's the job they're talking about? There's lots of jobs that generators can do.
Well, I don't know.
I think
I assume that the peaker plant's designed to shave the peak, to handle the load during peak periods.
That's right, but that's
The
not
batteries
what we're
can do that
talking about
too.
as a problem. The
Yeah, right,
problem is
right.
not that.
So, yeah, it doesn't provide power for
Stability.
indefinite
stability.
period. Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah, like Pika plants, they would be, they synchronize. Well, I'm sure I don't even know much about that one. I don't know if it's tied to the transmission or is it the distribution. I have no idea. But if it's tied to transmission, it's synchroned into the transmission. But batteries can almost do the same thing. It just Pikas could go a lot longer than batteries. And to be honest with you, Steve, the technology for battery is not there. We've had issues with ours, and I know other folks had issues with this, like an HVAC alarm. It's like game over. Actually, Brianna was there when we had issues.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's a whole different discussion. But
Good discussion. We're all gonna get awards for being junior engineers,
Tanya,
except for the real engineers.
Tanya, you did a good job explaining that. You get a sticker.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so data report. I think it's still, we have the data. Oh, I'll give a quick update. I don't know if Brianna has an update on the charging stations, but I've been starting to look at the backup generation data that Corey and Brianna were able to get from the town. And I started putting it into a spreadsheet that would, and I'm a quarter of the way through, and trust me, if there's somebody else who wants to do this, I'm happy to turn it over. But I've been going through each of the addresses, and I've been going to Zillow, and I've been putting how many bedrooms and what the square footage is, so that we understand approximately what the load would be that these generators are providing backup for, and understanding that it's not the entirety of the usage, but it just helps us to understand what a virtual power plant might look like if we were to aggregate all of them together and be able to operate them in mass. But the interesting thing about it is, as I'm going through, it's like 5 bedrooms, 7 bedrooms, 6,700 square feet, 5,600 square feet, 7,500 square feet. And then you see the tiny little 1,600 square foot, which is not tiny, but in the scheme of, what I've been looking at as we're going through this. And I think to myself, that's the guy who has oxygen, that he freaks out whenever the lights go out. Or that's the one who has the electrical medical needs that needs electricity to be able to operate. And so anyway, it's interesting. Part of our story, because we are a wealthy community, part of our story for the brick grant is it's not the wealthy homes that need the help. It's the most vulnerable in our community. And this data so far is definitely showing that not only on average are the generators for the big homes, but which means that it's going to be quite sizable what they could take off our needs. It's also showing that it truly is the most vulnerable in our town who need this type of microgrid for the emergency response and the warmth and the backup, even if they don't get the electricity directly. So that's part of the story. I will also note that there's approximately 10% of the homes in Cohasset have installed generators since 2013. So there's around almost 300 homes out of nearly 3,000 in the town. And if you estimate approximately what the generator is going to cost, backup generator is going to cost, that doesn't even count the little diesel units that some people are using. But if you calculate, that's almost $5 million that the people in town have invested in backup generation since 2013. So these are some of the numbers we're pulling together to help make our case for the BRIC grants. And I commend Corey and Brianna again for being able to get that data. And then we're still looking at the electric vehicle data to get a feel. It's smaller than I would expect, but we'll see if there's
We can
something
add
else.
one more. I just bought a Tesla last weekend, so.
Woohoo, Steve. I know some free charging that's available in town.
Steve, we gotta get some solar panels on your roof now.
Yeah, I
That'd be a
know,
good
I know. I gotta do
compliment.
that next. Yeah, Debbie's telling me the same thing.
That's great. Brianna, do you have anything on the charging stations?
Sure, yeah. So I'm looking at the dashboard, and August was actually, it surpassed all previous numbers we had in all of the categories. So we had the most unique drivers at 52, and previously in July and May, we had peaked at 42. So there were 10 new unique drivers in August. For sessions, previously it had maxed out at 156, and then in July there were only 130, but in August there were 166. So the number of sessions went up. And then by far, it's the most energy that the charging stations have expended. So, previously our peak was in June. It was 1.83 megawatts per hour. And then now it's, or not per hour, just megawatts. And in August, it was 2.35 megawatts. So that's, and we've avoided 12,387 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions, which is great.
Wait, say that again. How much?
12,387 kilograms. Kilograms.
How many trees is that?
318. And not only is it planting 318, it's letting all 318 grow for 10 years, which is, even if Cohasset held a tree planting day, we would not get that many trees planted. So it's really great.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, we will keep grabbing the data because information is power. And as you can tell, it helps to tell a good story. And we will be those people who are not in Mark Twain's category of lies, liars, and statistics, but truthers, and good information. All right. So next, anything else? Any questions about the data? Okay, any matters not reasonably known in advance? All right. Any reason why we should not end 7 minutes early? Because if there's not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thanks, Mike. I was gonna say nobody wants to leave. All right, we don't have to do a roll call vote for this. All in favor?
Aye.
And
Aye.
aye.
Thanks for the
All
good
right.
news.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
Great news,
Bye.
Tanya.
All right, bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.